Hello and welcome to this dedicated ESG panel. My name's Chris Cann with Mining Journal and Mining Magazine. And with me, I have a panel of sustainability experts. Namely, I have Erik Svedlund, Senior Zero Emission Manager with Epiroc Electrification. Laurie Clark, who is Founder, Director and CEO of Onyen Corporation. And Vicente Vicuña, Project Director for the Consult Unit for RCS Global, which sits within the SLR group. So clearly, ESG is a huge topic area. Literally, it is 3 different topic areas, and then they can all be subdivided into their own categories under that. So we're not going to attempt to tackle the full ESG spectrum today. Rather, what we're focusing on are the sustainability reporting guidelines and the challenges around that specific area, and then how we're using technologies to improve our sustainability performance overall. So welcome everyone. First question I wanted to throw at you guys: are we making progress in aligning sustainability guidelines to make compliance reporting easier to execute for companies and then easier to understand for investors and for other stakeholder groups? And Laurie, that feels like a natural one for you to lead off on.
When we started down this road, there were approximately 300 ESG standards globally. We are now at over 600 ESG standards globally. Now, 32 of those are the most widely accepted, and they're the most globally looked at by most companies. What has occurred, thankfully, is that there's a broader acceptance of some standards, which is seems to be TCFD and SASB, which is now ISSB, okay, because there's been some integration there. Now, with that, if you complement those two, well, TCFD being a framework and SASB being a standard, with the GRI disclosures, which is very prominent in Europe, it's bringing some clarity to what investors are looking for in order to assess and price risk, which is what this is all about. It's widely anticipated that with some modifications, the leading disclosure frameworks will be aligned and will facilitate more standardized, consistent reporting on material business factors. This is only one of the aspects of this compliance reporting, and I do stress compliance reporting because this is what this is. And so what we've done is Onyen has successfully integrated these compliance standards into our platform, and we're helping customers with, simplifying and guiding them through this process.
Vicente, I saw you nodding along there. Was there something in particular that, that Laurie spoke about that particularly resonated with you?
I think there's definitely a lot of truth in what she's saying. There's indeed a lack of consolidation, a lack of consistency. I think there has been, for sure, a lot of good progress, and I will throw in my 2 cents here from the perspective of also sustainability and mining specific standards. I see a lot of efforts to align with certain reporting and compliance standards such as GRI, but even within mining standards themselves, I see a lot of struggle, a lot of effort also, but a lot of struggle in order to look for convergence. And as I mentioned, one of these challenges is precisely lack of consistency. And there are several sustainability guidelines and standards such as the GRI, the SDGs, and within mining specific standards, we have TSM towards sustainable mining, ICMM, which is the International Council on Mining and Metals, the PEs, the performance expectations, and more. And each of these frameworks has its own set of requirements, and it makes it really difficult for mining companies to comply with all of them. And this has resulted in different segments of the industry picking the one that suits them best, and sometimes more than one, but there is always this conflict, which is very difficult for mining companies to face, and this is very much associated also with resource constraints. And I'm thinking about medium-sized mining companies, right? And on top of this,
yeah. And I agree with you, Vicente. One of the things that we did early on, I mean, because that's exactly why Onyen was born. That's the creation of Onyen, what you just stated right then and there, is that we saw the need for technology to come into play, because that is where the answer lies. It's the utilization of technology to assist companies in being able to bridge the challenge of having to consolidate all of these different factors and frameworks and standards to bring about not only consolidation, but consistency, efficiency, driving resource allocation much more effectively, and to lower the cost and the temperature of all this reporting, because it is compliance reporting at the end of the day, and it's going to be here for the foreseeable future, if not forever, in some format, and also tied to financial disclosures eventually. Therefore, technology has a big stake in it.
100%.
Sorry, Vicente, I just wanted to ask a quick question there. Laurie, Onyen's in this backyard of these structures and these standards and these guidelines, but there are so many out there, and they are, you mentioned integration, Vicente's mentioning integration and convergence. We spoke with the World Gold Council and the ICMM a few years back around this issue, and they were looking at converging, and I think they'd managed to make some progress, but it seems to be happening really, really slowly. Is that the right perception? Is it happening really slowly? How can it be sped up? Because mining companies and smaller development companies and even juniors seem to be really suffering at the moment from this quagmire of compliance, guidelines, standard certification schemes.
You have, unfortunately, a lot of organizations that have made quite a meal out of this compliance regime. And therefore you have, and I will state it, you have fiefdoms that are out there that have created these large entities. And therefore you have to understand that there are organizations that are going to hold their own perspectives in order to ensure that they are relevant. So you have that dichotomy, that natural tension within the industry itself. What will happen is that, as in all compliance regimes and in all compliance matrices and business in general, is that there will be a forced consolidation, whether these organizations want it or not, because and it's being felt already, because TCFD is already being supported by the Securities Exchange Commission and other organizations. GRI and SASB are already, holding talks to perhaps align with one another, which is now the ISSB, again, because the Securities Exchange Commission has been really underscoring a need for that consolidation. GRI is very prevalent in Europe with the CSRD, which is another framework that is going to be competing with TCFD. So there will be a natural absorption that will occur, because companies will force the issue. The industry itself will force the issue.
Vicente, is that something you'd agree with? I know we're talking about some of these standards that have been around for kind of 5 or 10 years, the pressures on the mining companies are getting immense and greater every year, but the standards and the guidelines are taking their sweet time to actually converge and make it easier for them. Is it happening quick enough in your mind?
Yeah, let me tell you something. I sure hope so, but it's a huge endeavor. And we mentioned just a few minutes ago CSRD, and then when you also add on top regulation, especially regulation that's coming from the EU, then the situation turns super horny, right? And yeah, indeed, I do hope so that it goes in this direction. It's difficult to tell. There are a lot of these different interests, and specifically within these different standards, a lot of different strategies to gain more traction, right? And so a lot of competing interests here.
Mm-hmm.
Laurie, if I can come back to you.
My idea, I think it's really interesting, the new regulations within the EU, such as a new battery directive that really demands that you declare climate content in your product. And that is that's going to drive a change in this, because now you have to do, otherwise you're not going to comply. And this small organization they will have to adopt a new reality there. And the alternative is not to act on that market. And EU is roughly 1/3 of the world market. So yeah, this is going to drive change, willing or not.
Correct.
Laurie,
Correct. In fact, with Article, think about it, Chris, sorry, Chris, but think about Article 8 that just came into effect this year. Although it had been already identified several years ago, Article 8 has just impacted the European business sector enormously, because not only do they, all it is about a double materiality disclosures, but just that word itself, double materiality, it has enormous impact, because you're not only disclosing on what is being stated within your own world, but how you affect the greater world around you. That's a very challenging way of reporting and disclosing information, especially if it has to be factual, objective, very precise disclosure. That in itself is a very large endeavor. So there are very obvious competing elements here, and competing factors and competing interests. But it will be business itself that will start pushing for consolidation and for greater clarity, because otherwise it will be a conundrum for everyone.
So where are the big challenges? Where are the real bottlenecks when we're looking at some of these guidelines? Because some of them, we get complaints in the industry that they are not relevant for the mining space. Which are the ones that need to converge? Which are the ones that are causing the mining industry the most problems, and where the mining industry has to find a way to become compliant and to report better and more consistently to be able to do business?
Right now, there is a much broader positive investor acceptance of sustainability reports, and it's supported by data and examples of corporate achievements. Okay. Even the junior companies are learning that broader statements of being good corporate citizens are not going to be sufficient, because investors are looking for facts and financial estimates of the impacts from a variety of environmental and social factors. Okay, the result has to be discipline, accountability, scrutiny. That's what investors want. That is what is going to drive the standards to be effective. So TCFD, very effective, because what it does is it amalgamates the ISSB, which is SASB, and GRI disclosures. Okay, it's very on point. And so these standards are going to be very factual in nature, very numeric and metric driven. And then there will be others that will support regional requirements, because regulatory bodies are going to be supportive of certain standards or disclosures within the context of where they reside. So you have, for example, the Towards Sustainable Mining, which is a Canadian, it's the Canadian Association of Mining, or the Canadian Mining Association. It has a directive to support the mining industry that is listed in Canada, which is quite a large amount. It's a large percentage of the world's mining companies. And it supports that endeavor. What you will see is, as things progress, these regulators will have to naturally start to cooperate, and only to ensure that, because let's face it, in 2024, this becomes mandatory in in most of the world. In 2025, penalties and sanctions are going to kick in. We know this. They're going to tie it in with financial disclosures. We know this. That is when the rubber hits the road. That is when, business is going to say, well, I'm doing this reporting, it's costing X. I want relief. And it will force regulators to address that.
Okay, well, let's look at how we're sitting at the moment in the mining industry. In terms of stakeholders, and we've talked about investors, but there is obviously a greater stakeholder group for the mining sector. How is current reporting standards and current compliance being received by that broader stakeholder group in your experience?
I think when we're talking specifically about mining specific standards, right? You have to talk about a certain segmentation between downstream and upstream stakeholders. Upstream being obviously the mining companies, downstream being, automotive OEMs, right? And what's very interesting is that, for example, for an automotive manufacturing company, the best standard, the one that's up there, especially when it comes to critical minerals, is IRMA, right? But for an upstream company, the situation is very different. IRMA becomes very, very, very challenging to comply with. It's extremely, absurdly expensive in some cases. I mean, I'm talking just an audit of IRMA can cost over $100,000 US. And so obviously there's a huge resistance to adopt such a standard. It's definitely difficult to claim that IRMA has gained significant traction beyond Anglo-American and some lithium producers. Yeah. And the story, for example, is different with Coppermark, which has relatively good credibility downstream. But for example, for you name it, civil society or an NGO, it might be not enough, because once the results of the audit are out, they are not that specific in terms of performance. It's rather partially meets fully, and so on. Whereas IRMA, the results are laid out in a quite dramatic manner, I would say. So really the reactions and the feedback from the different stakeholders really varies from standard to standard. And the same goes for TSM and another mining specific cases.
Mm-hmm.
Laurie, is that what you see, and specifically in terms of where we are today, and you've talked about what needs to change in the next few years, a big step change is required?
What's going to, and I keep reiterating the same statement, is that, yes, and I agree with Vicente on the IRMA or IRMA. it is an Australian initiative, and a lot of companies in Australia have adopted it, and they have struggled with it. The larger companies are able to support the IRMA disclosures because they are large and have the resources, both human and financial, to be able to disclose with that particular standard. Smaller companies struggle with it enormously because it is very, very onerous. Just as IFC, I mean, when companies are going for any kind of debt financing, they are compelled by the institutions, by the financial institutions, to disclose using IFC, the International Finance Corporation Standards, which is the Equator Principles. They are onerous indeed, and very costly. However, firms will, or companies will disclose with IFC, but struggle with IRMA. So when that occurs, what will happen is that there will be a natural resistance, natural tension. Again, I come back to the tension within the marketplace, because those are the type of events that will lead to either a successful outcome or an unsuccessful outcome. And in this case, we are seeing that natural attrition and consolidation being driven by those very facts.
Erik, in terms of changing the performance, so we have better, happier things, more well-received metrics to report. What are the key levers that you see us needing to pull, or the mining industry needing to pull, to make that a reality?
Well, there's a few things. For the reporting, we need data, and that is digitalization is really helping with that. To change and make the mining more efficient, which is improving the performance data. Automation and other aspects there is really helping. We also see possibilities with AI, but the real thing that's actually going to change mining is the electrification. So electrification of mining is going to be the biggest change we see in the next coming decade, but that actually will affect the reporting. So electric machines and powered by renewable energy, and in this combination, we can see really how mining will totally change in that way.
Erik, in terms of electrification, we've been watching it unfold for several years now. There have been some bottlenecks with the technology, some areas where it's been really successful. Where do you see the biggest changes within that electrification world that miners could potentially see in the next few years that will change their performance?
Well, I think the latest development and so on, because this is a learning journey. We're trying to replace diesel that has been evolving for 100 years with something that needs to be as good and as productive and as cost effective, from day one. Being electric machines and batteries is one of the difficult part there, because it's quite costly and it's a new technology, and keeping that safe in the mine environment. But the learnings over the last, well, actually decade, Epiroc has been having battery machines in mines since in the last 10 years, and that is now really taking off. And the maturity in that technology and the acceptance is really there now. Underground mining has been leading, but now we can see also the movement on surface, and the bigger machines on the open pits actually now look and have a clear roadmap towards electrification. And that is really, really encouraging to see. Yeah, that's my take there.
Vicente, if I can ask you the same question, and just to be clear, we are going to talk specifically about the technologies that are available for miners in a moment, but looking broadly at technology, at policy, at strategy, the big levers that miners can pull now about culture. Where do you see the really big changes that groups can employ today to improve their performance?
I think taking a step back, right? I mean, we are in the midst of a huge change, and for this we need minerals. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the green agenda. We're talking about digitalization. We're talking about defense agenda. Also, we need minerals for this. I think one of the biggest levers for the mining industry is actually proper stakeholder and community engagement. I think, fortunately, the trend and the quality of information delivered by mining companies is improving, and this plays a critical role in shaping perceptions and investment decisions and stakeholder sentiment towards mining. I mean, I come from Chile, which is eminently a mining nation, and we are proud of it. We call it actually the salary of Chile, and but this is not possible if not in my backyard is the prevailing sentiment, right? And we need to, mining in general needs to be able to transmit that it is crucial for the future of the world, and it can be done properly.
Laurie, your thoughts on that same question?
Well, my whole life has been around, I was a trader in my old life, and I've been building systems since those days. And I have to tell you, with AI coming on so strong, it is going to revolutionize all sorts of, not only the labor force that we understand. Everybody's talking about all the white collar jobs that are going to be eliminated because of AI technology. But actually, what's going to end up happening is that there will be an impetus and a much more quick capability of transition because of AI technology, because of the learning mechanisms within the machine learning capabilities of AI. And that is going to drive a lot of innovation forward within the mining community also. For example, you have, all of the impact assessments and the various research that is going to be conducted is going to be done much faster and with much more information that is factual, that can be done, and it will help. Also, you're going to have the capability of all, making predictive modeling much more effective. For example, what we did, okay? So Onyen is a reporting system, but what it also does is it because we're taking in so much data from so many different industries, we started with mining, metals, and oil and gas sectors, but now we are into farming and agribusiness and transportation and logistics and chemical companies, renewable energy. We've expanded quite a bit. Well, we're taking in so much data. What ends up happening is that we now, with our AI capabilities, are able to provide our customers with predictive modeling that show them, for example, their water impact, in 5, 10, 15 years, and their energy impact in 5, 10, 15 years. And that's tremendous information to have as a company when you're spending millions upon millions for projects that are going to impact the world. So this type of technology that's coming on so quickly into our world is going to have a direct impact on all the processes, including mining and metals. Both what Erik is doing with electrification and what Vicente is going to be doing with how he sees, mining within Chile or other sectors of the world or other geographic locations of the world. So absolutely, technology is going to change everything.
Erik, if I can come back to you on this, it feels like, as Laurie is saying again, technology is there. It's moving really quickly. The opportunities are massive. But my question would be, does the mining industry understand what these technologies look like? And if we speak to your specific area of expertise in electrification, does the industry understand what's possible, and is it investing to make these changes?
As I said earlier, I mean, we have been basically learning the technology now as an industry, the new technology of electric machines and implementing that and kind of proving that it will work, because it's very difficult to take these investments or these leaps in a mining project that is, billions of investments. And if you are going to bet everything on a new technology, you have to be pretty sure that this will work. Otherwise, that's a wasted investment or potential risks with that. But we've proven that this work, and we can see really the acceptance and the adoption of that in the mining industry, and how this is actually now, well, actually the reporting, as we discussing now, is really a driver for this change, because, you know, if you're not measured, how are you good or bad? And when you start measuring and actually have to report, it shows that we cannot continue relying on fossil fuels as a power source for our industry. So, and this is really changing everything. There is a lot of projects now looking at electric machines, and this is we are just still in the beginning. This is going to change mining and the face of mining. The social license to operate is going to be totally changed. Mining is considered or seen generally as a part of the problem, and which it is, but it's also part of the solution. We're not going to change and make this energy transition without the minerals and metals needed to leave fossil fuels. So when we actually adopt green mining practices, we will change the face of mining and the acceptance in the industry. Looking at many parts, you mentioned Chile here, the acceptance for mining is quite high. In Europe, it's quite much the opposite. It's super difficult to have mining or get acceptance for mining or start a mine in Europe because of the not in my backyard mentality and so on. But this is changing. It's realized that we do not want to have or change the dependency on oil, coal, and gas from countries that we don't necessarily sympathize with, to dependency on minerals and metals from regions or countries that we don't necessarily sympathize with. So local production and local mining is really going to be essential. And in Europe, for example, there is all the metals needed to have so to support this energy transition, basically even in Scandinavia. But we have to get permitting processes and acceptance for mining, etc., to speed up to be able to do this. And the social license to operate and changing the face of mining as innovative and green and a part of the solution instead of part of the problem is really critical.
Erik, when you're sitting there within Epiroc, obviously it's a large group, you cover different parts of the mining ecosystem. What kind of conversations do you have between different parts of the business around how you work together to improve each other's solutions to build this holistic green mine? Are you quite communicative there, or do you find that you're all working on different parts of the mining process in isolation?
I think we're getting better to see the total solution, because there's typically a product company. We sell the products, but actually not a product only that you can sell here. A diesel machine, you deliver to mine and they start operating it. Here we need to look at actually at the total impact on the ecosystem. The electric machines need a charging infrastructure. Is that charging infrastructure there today? No, it's not. And if we design a machine that needs a charging infrastructure, does the grid is it able to support that infrastructure? Are we building ourselves into a dead end again? So from Epiroc, we are coming with different views and different solutions, and also with recent acquisitions, we have acquired companies that can support with the grid and the installation of mines to accelerate the implementation of electric machines, but also enable the use of renewable energy, because you need to see this as the total concept. And yeah.
Vicente, Laurie, I wanted to move on to ask a really unfair question and get you guys getting the crystal ball out in a minute. But before we move on to that, did you have any questions? Did you have any statements or anything to throw in there around technology and how mining is currently using it and its understanding of what's available?
Technology is a powerful tool. That's what it is. And from my perspective and from my world, it's an excellent tool in order to capture and visualize data. Okay. And so what it does is it assists in timely communication and decision-making. Technology at its best highlights risks and opportunities. And when you combine that with the power of AI, the way that we've done, it identifies them, the risks and opportunities immediately, so that companies can be effective in the way that they can deal with their world and with their projects today, and how they're going to then affect their future. Now, the public and private companies that have deep pockets can obviously invest in more of these types of technology-driven results. It's harder for the smaller companies to keep up. And so what we've done is we've made sure that at Onyen, we're really targeting the small to mid-tier sectors of industry so that they can avail themselves of powerful technology at reasonable cost. But as technology drives forward, the price of it will start to come down, as in all things, right? It will, as it becomes more commonplace, then the pricing will come down. But then companies are also learning to be smarter about how to follow trends and how to partner with the right vendors, and how to identify what's coming up within their world so that they can take advantage of the opportunities. And so they're starting to understand how to gain efficiencies and better communication channels. And so that, and all of this, okay, let me step back. All of this leads to one main goal, and that is to access capital providers, investors, banks, and insurance companies. This is where it's all headed, but also in using technology to be able to change the perspective of the larger and wider community and all the stakeholders involved in these projects, because there are many and they have all competing interests. And so if we're all going to be digitally connected, and it evolves a company's reputation, which is what drives the valuations, premium valuations at that. And so that could be easily impacted through the right digital presence and the right digital communication. What's the word? The right digital communication levers.
Vicente, anything you wanted to add into that, or should I ask my last question?
Yeah, no, I'll add a few points. I can't agree more with Laurie and Erik. I mean, first of all, I think to Laurie's points, you can't manage when you don't measure, right? I think it boils down into this, and we need all sorts of sensors and technologies and AI and a big list of different enablers to really be able not only to manage operations, but also have a very clear notion of what's the impact that mining is creating within that sphere of influence, right? Another point is regarding electrification, and again, we think we need a combination of technologies here: battery, solar panels, wind turbines, and not only electrification, but in those cases that electrification is difficult to be to occur, then we need, for example, hydrogen hauling trucks and so on. And so I think there's a combination of factors, no? And lastly, in terms of technology, I also wanted to mention one is that this very much regulation driven, and that is traceability, right? We have the EU battery regulation coming up, which is going to be very, very big, very significant for a lot of players. And here we need the best of every technology out there in order to be able to trace from the mine to the battery to the QR that the end user is snapping. We need to be able to trace that. And that includes a lot of data points, a lot of information, and a lot of collaboration of too. And that's what I wanted to add.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and my final question before I let everyone go. If the mining industry in 10 years' time is to be compliant with the standards that we are placing on the industry that are being proclaimed by the certification schemes and the standards that are out there, what does it look like in your mind? How is it materially different from what the industry looks like today? Erik, I'm going to put you on the spot and come to you first.
Yeah, I think the biggest change we will physically see is the mine site is going to be, there is not going to be much diesel machines anymore. They're basically all going to be, they're going to be electric, and they're going to be electric in a few different ways, but generally all electric, cable, battery, or hybrid power somewhere. But it's going to be no diesels, and they're going to be local production of electricity on site. Most mining sites today have vast amounts of land that is just blocked off for the sake of mining. And this is a fantastic way to reshape mining in the face of mining to produce their own electricity. And it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the profitable thing to do, because securing your access to green renewable energy is going to be is fundamental for the future profitability of mines. So that is, I think that is one thing that we will really see. What we will not see is probably the digital aspects of this, and how automation and how digitalization is going to help us take smarter decisions, become more efficient. And then that is what probably we will not see. Things we have to solve though is how are we going to share data to be able to take smart decisions, because today data is generated, but it's difficult to share because no one wants to share data because of the risks of what that could mean. So that is something we actually also have to work with quite a lot, and how to share it and in what ways, and harmonize those. That would be awesome if we could do. Yeah, I'll think I end there.
Do you think that's realistic, Erik? Could you see us as an industry in 10 years being more open? And I suppose both through the companies, which I think are trying in places to be more collaborative, but also obviously the OEMs and general service providers being more collaborative and sharing data. Is that realistic, or should we be focusing on the things we can actually achieve?
It is realistic. It's being worked on, but it's difficult. Some companies do not want to share data. Epiroc has a quite open approach where we want to openly share and produce interfaces towards other systems, for example. Some other OEMs does not have the same kind of approach. They want to sell also that system on the other side, and so on. So we have to work there, but I think as an industry, at the end, it's basically the customers that will decide the way forward here. They have to guide the OEMs by well, actually, their choices. So from the data aspect, yeah.
Laurie, same question. 10 years time. What does it look like?
Well, okay. In 10 years time, that's a very aggressive timeline. So absolutely, I agree with Erik that we will see electrification of mines, because that's already underway. Also renewable energy that drives the electrification. So solar, wind, even wave energy, so those sources are going to be apparent. And that will change the way that business is conducted, the way that mines are operated, and the way that other manufacturing plants are going to be, operating. It's going to impact everything. Water, though, because for me, it's a three-pronged approach, and that is electrification, renewable energy, water. Okay. And of course, in my world, it's always about data. But water and water use and water consumption, that is a very fundamental and challenging area that we have to address. And with renewable energy, then we can create water sources that are much more efficient, that are going to be much more effective. So the electrification is one thing. Having renewable energy to be able to drive those methods are going to be very necessary, and that's coming on strong. Will it be here, all of it, in 10 years? I don't think so. Will it be here in 21 years? Absolutely. But water is where everyone, and rightly so, should be focused, because without efficient and cost-effective methods to ensure that we have controllable water consumption. One of the things that we did, and it's just an example of how absolutely brilliant some of these projects are. We have partnered with a company in the Netherlands that have enormous data that comes into our system now, driven by satellites. And the satellites are picking up, and I kid you not, they're picking up water saturation and consumption and soil degradation on all of the world's land base. And what it can do is identify on a 10-meter squared grid capability what your soil degradation, water consumption, water saturation levels are. Now, put that in the context of a farm. And a small farmer is forced, because he is in the food chain, to have to disclose a report about what these are, okay, what his soil degradation, soil consumption, soil saturation levels are. He's not going to know that. He's not a scientist. It's very hard. Therefore, having that information at his or her disposal is incredible. And it's made easily because of this technology. So will we have incredible achievements? Absolutely, because I'm seeing it already. It's already evident. Will it be much? How is it going to change the industries? What's going to happen is I'm the small farmer, or I'm the smaller mine. I am now working with a larger company. The larger company has to disclose information. That larger company is going to put its foot down and say to me, the smaller company, you are going to give me your figures in order for me to identify what my figures are. Therefore, if you want to work with me, you have to do this. That is what's going to drive the supply chain. And we're seeing it already. If I have a customer that is larger, that I wish to keep, like I'm working for a government, or government is my customer, or a large industrial company is my customer. I want to keep that customer. That customer is going to tell me, I need your figures. That's what's going to drive data absorption and capture. And so that's what's going to force the sharing of information. Now, is it going to be easy? It's not going to be easy. But will it get there? We will have to, because otherwise I'm going to lose a customer. So it's very pragmatic as well. It's about, at the end of the day, it's about ensuring that your business is viable.
Vicente, are you on board with that? I imagine you were nodding vigorously with your Chilean background when Laura was talking about the importance of water specifically.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, as I was thinking about this question, as I remembered when I was participating and indeed for formulating the national mining plan for Chile, which is actually towards 2050, And indeed, we're going to see mining that is highly decarbonized in one way or the other. 100% obviously is more for 2050 than before. We're going to see mining that is highly circular. In Chile, I believe we have numbers towards 70% of the water that is used in mining operations is actually being circulated again and again. And that water that is not being extracted, is actually a lot coming from the sea. So I think we're also going to see a lot of desalination plants sprouting all over mining operations. And this also includes circularity, the processing of tailings. Maybe 10 years is still a bit too soon, but I do think we are going to see a lot of interesting initiatives when it comes to reprocessing tailings, especially those that are legacy tailings from the 50s or even before, right? I think we're also going to see a mining industry that is highly embedded in the community that it's operating. It's trying to give something back to the community, trying to improve the perception that the stakeholders have of its operations and its branding. And also, I think we're going to see a mining industry that is much more transparent. And on this last point, I wanted to say that mining companies are increasingly focused on responsible sourcing practices, and this includes traceability and transparency in the supply chain. And downstream beneficiaries are driving this, as well as circular and regenerative economic models. The rise of ESG investing has increased investor regulatory demand for quality and comprehensive disclosure. And so I think this also comes hand in hand with a lot of savvy investors and civil society and stakeholders.
It is crucial that the mining industry accelerates the transformation towards green mining practices. It's not only the right thing to do, but it also presents a more profitable and sustainable future for the industry as a whole. Embracing green mining will enhance the social license to operate and improves employer attractiveness. And that will create a competitive advantage also by having low carbon products to offer. But to successfully achieve this transformation, collaboration is key. And no single company can achieve this alone. We must work together. Mining companies, OEMs, energy providers, investors, and other stakeholders. We must share knowledge and innovations and best practices to enable the industry to thrive in a sustainable manner. And by accelerating the transition to green mining, we can ensure a more environmentally responsible and profitable industry, and that contributes positively to the global push towards a low carbon future.
That is all we have time for. Erik Svedlund with Epiroc, Laurie with Onyen Corporation, and Vicente Vicuña with the SLR Group. It's been fascinating to speak with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
That was mine. Thank you.